Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me just begin by saying the feeling is mutual. I have tremendous respect and admiration for my colleague from the Sunshine State. And I hear loud and clear the critical elements of this bill that have been deemed necessary. Heck, I deem them necessary. The American people and the representatives in this chamber, we demand fully accountability and transparency. However, there are multiple poison pills within this text that the American people, and certainly not my constituents back home, support. For example, $300 million for international narcotics control and law enforcement. What about the 100,000 plus people every single year in America that are being poisoned by fentanyl? Where is the funding to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States? What about the $25 million for transition initiatives? What about the $60 million for diplomatic programs? I noticed that my colleague, again, who I deeply respect, he mentioned that part of that is for security, but what about the rest? Or the $481 million for refugee and entrance assistance? We have a border crisis that has resulted in one of the most egregious public health, public safety, humanitarian, and national security crises in American history. We are approaching over 10 million illegals crossing into our country, being quote unquote paroled, which is just a fancy way of saying catch and release, into the United States, approaching 2 million gotaways. We have a massive crisis here at home, and if America is not safe and secure here at home, we cannot help our partners abroad. I urge respectfully that my colleagues put America first and adopt this amendment. With that, I yield.
The gentlewoman from Florida yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that the committee do rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
Very emotional.
The ayes have it. The motion is adopted according to the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
The one and only Festival of Winnings returns on Barry Match, and it's bigger than ever. Extremely high stakes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1160, I call up the bill H.R. 8034, the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8034, a bill making emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the situation in Israel and for related expenses for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1160, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 30 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the committee on the appropriations of their respective designees. The gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, will each control 15 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself what time I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to offer House Resolution 8034, the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. This bill provides $26.38 billion to fortify America's support of our Israeli allies and defend our troops in the region. It is part of a larger package of 3 security supplemental appropriation acts before us: Israel, Ukraine, and Indo-Pacific. All 3 are essential to deter our adversaries. There are moments where actions is optional, a convenience but not a necessity, a choice. This is not one of those moments. The world is in chaos. Americans have been killed, and our allies and partners are dying in the front lines every day. Ukraine is entering its 3rd year of a war to repel Russia's invasion. While forced to conserve their munitions and choose which areas to defend, Israel is avenging its innocent civilians who were murdered, raped, brutalized, and taken hostage by Hamas, while defending its country from a barrage of Iranian missiles. Indo-Pacific nations face China daily with strength and resolve, knowing they are likely next. The United States is not on the sidelines in these conflicts. Our service members are under daily attack in the Red Sea, standing watch along NATO's eastern flank, and being routinely challenged in the Indo-Pacific. 5 American flag draped coffins have returned home in the past 6 months. When we go to war with what we have. There is no time to forge new alliances, no ability to reconstruct abandoned production lines, and no hidden reserve of fully trained and ready troops. This is a situation our allies and partners in Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and other Indo-Pacific nations face today. It is a situation ourselves may face sooner than we think. Xi, Putin, Khamenei, and terrorist leaders will not back down unless met with a strong and resolute America, standing shoulder to shoulder with our constellation of allies and partners. These bills provide the funding necessary to defeat and deter our enemies. While the bills carry the names of other countries, there is one nation that I care about above all others, and that is ours. These conflicts have exposed the fragility of our defense industrial base and dire need to invest in factories, shipyards, assembly lines that manufacture the instruments of our national defense. In recognition of this fact, over $59 billion across these bills go into our defense industrial base, including $3.3 billion to supercharge a submarine industrial base, $29.5 billion to replenish our stocks of U.S. defense systems and services provided to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, $1.13 billion to expand procurement and development of artillery and critical munitions. Each conflict has unique needs and is addressed by these bills, including $5.2 billion to replenish Israel's Iron Dome, David Sling, and procure the Iron Beam missile defense systems, $542 million for unfunded priorities requested by the Indo-PACOM commander, and $13.8 billion directly to procure U.S. capability for Ukraine. Our servicemen and women across the globe are being asked to operate at a wartime tempo to track, respond, and engage emerging threats. These bills provide the resources necessary to support their operations, with $11.3 billion for current U.S. operations in Europe, $2.4 billion for forces in the Middle East who are under daily attack. Mr. Speaker, we've been complacent for far too long, as our allies and partners and our own service members have been under attack. This Congress has a solemn obligation to our military to provide them with the resources they need to deter and win our nation's wars. Douglas MacArthur once said that the history of the failure of war can almost be summed up in 2 words: too late. When conflict occurs, we will fight with what we have and who is with us. Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on these bills to ensure our military readiness and revigorate American defense industry. I encourage them to vote yes to reinforce our Israeli, Ukrainian, Taiwanese, and Indo-Pacific allies and partners. I encourage them to vote yes so that future generations may write on what we did here today. They weren't too late. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Speaker, I give myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Speaker, I rise in strong support of the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act, which will provide Israel with desperately needed aid to respond to the horrific October 7th attacks and protect itself from Iran and its proxies. What happened in Israel on October 7th was horrifying. On a recent trip to Israel, I saw firsthand the remnants of the violence that innocent people were subjected to, including the site of the Supernova Sukkot gathering, the gathering at which it was a music festival that Hamas attacked. Kibbutz Berei and the homes where so many were massacred, and Hostage Square, where I met with families of those taken hostage by Hamas. The United States has not forgotten October 7th, and today we are providing aid Israel has needed since the day Hamas terrorists killed innocent Israeli civilians in the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. Just last weekend, Israel was openly and directly attacked by Iran. I applaud the role of the United States in providing Israel support in its defense against that attack. But while we must ensure Israel can stand strong in the face of adversaries like Iran that seek its annihilation, we must also ensure that every step possible is taken to protect innocent life in Gaza and elsewhere. On my trip, we also went to Kiryat Zenuta, a Palestinian village in the West Bank, where settlers destroyed homes and a school. On the trip, we were also briefed from Gaza by humanitarian organizations, including UNRWA, which have lost hundreds of staff to the violence. To that end, I have called for an immediate ceasefire of at least 6 weeks to facilitate the safe delivery of aid to civilians in Gaza. We must protect aid workers. We must open additional crossings to bring in at least 500 trucks a day and ensure that food is never used as a weapon of war. Innocent families are endangered, children are starving, and civilian casualties are mounting, not just in Gaza, but in conflict zones all around the world. The more than $9 billion in humanitarian support in this bill would make sure that we are not leaving Gazans, the Ukrainians, the Sudanese, the Haitians, or the Rohingya behind. We must pass this bill, ensure Israel has the resources it needs to defend itself, and that much-needed humanitarian aid can flow to millions of vulnerable people around the world. I urge your support, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Georgia, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Clyde, for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Calvert. I will always stand with our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel, but I rise today to express my serious concerns with the very flawed supplemental. In November, I supported the first security supplemental for Israel, which was financially paid for and provided weapons and equipment for Israel's fight against Hamas. The cost was offset by rescinding Democrats' unprecedented expansion of the IRS. Today, we are considering a vastly different bill, one that is all borrowing, another $26 billion of debt with no rescissions. The legislation also contains $400 billion for FEMA, which has nothing to do with supporting Israel, and over $9 billion for humanitarian aid in Hamas-controlled Gaza and the West Bank. A report from Heritage Foundation stated the problem with aid diversion to Hamas and other terrorist groups plagues all international and non-governmental aid organizations operating in Gaza. It is therefore highly likely that U.S. taxpayer-funded humanitarian aid to Gaza, including some of the aid in this bill, would again be diverted to support further Hamas attacks against Israel. Why would we knowingly be sending money into the hands of Hamas in any bill? If we are feeding Gaza, we are feeding Hamas. Therefore, with great disappointment, I cannot in good conscience vote for this bill and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady is recognized.
Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the Financial Services and General Government Subcommittee, Mr. Hoyer.
Rapidoல lowest price क्या guarantee இல்லனா உங்களுக்கு double price guarantee guarantee lowest price guarantee.
It's the issues at hand. I often say it's never too late to do the right thing, but waiting to do the right thing comes at a cost. We saw that cost in Israel this week as an emboldened Iran launched an unprecedented attack on our ally. For Ukraine, the cost of our inaction is great, if incalculable. It is measured in Ukrainian lives, towns, and territory lost. For 478 days, Congress's words of support fell silent on Ukrainian ears, deafened by the air raid sirens, artillery bombardment, and drone attacks. Today, we act. We act to make it clear to the world that America is still the defender of freedom, democracy, and international law, as well as our friends and allies, and the opponent of tyrants and terrorists. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. Vote yes to show Jews in Israel, America, and beyond that this Congress will always stand up for their safety. Vote yes to demonstrate to Russia, Iran, North Korea, and every other authoritarian despot, and to terrorists everywhere, that America remains committed to defending freedom here and around the world. Let our bipartisan support for allies endure the months ahead, whether it's to secure the release of the 134 hostages held captive in Gaza or to turn back Putin's criminal invasion. The voice of resolve and opposition to tyranny must not be muted, nor should it be delayed. Let us pray that the majority that speaks today will remain loud and clear for all to hear.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is recognized.
I yield the gentleman from California, Mr. McIntosh, for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Ukraine and Israel are in growing danger of running out of arms and ammunition while China casts a hungry eye on Taiwan. History warns us of allowing aggression to grow unchecked and of how quickly events in an unstable world can unravel. Profligate spending is exhausting our resources and damaging our economy, but as Reagan reminded us, defense is not a budget issue. You spend what you need to spend. And although the defense of these besieged nations is one step removed from our own, it would be a very good thing to keep it that way. I regret that the three military aid bills are larded up with about $20 billion of economic handouts, but we are out of options and we are out of time. I'm afraid that's the price we now have to pay for months of dithering in this House. Without these bills today, we and the world risk a future butcher's bill that is incalculable. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady is recognized.
Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, the ranking member of the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, Ms. Osmond Schultz.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is incomprehensible that the Israeli hostages captured on Simchas Torah are still in Hamas's captivity as we approach Passover. I rise to finally provide long overdue aid to our ally Israel as she fights to defend herself against threats on multiple fronts. On October 7th, Hamas launched a massacre that led to the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Hamas murdered, raped, and captured Israelis, Americans, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and people from dozens of countries. Hamas broke a ceasefire and declared war on humanity. Since that bloody day, Hamas terrorists have promised to carry out the attack again and again. I recently visited Israel for the third time since